Good evening, Professor.
Yeah, good evening, students. Are you able to listen to me?
Yes, ma'am.
Tawseef, are you there? Tawseef?
Ma'am, we had a telephonic conversation. He's having some technical issues to log in.
Can anyone respond? Unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am. I am responding.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I had a
yeah.
telephonic conversation with the professor. He's actually having some technical issues. He's not able to unmute himself or log. Now he's able to log in though.
This is DV Janathan actually.
Yes, ma'am. I'm already here.
Yeah, Janardhan.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so Tawseef has joined.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. I'm already here.
Okay,
I start my
please
video?
continue the class. Please continue. Is it okay? Everything is okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, please. Go ahead with your class. Okay.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah, who is this? Zoom user. Who is this?
Yeah, ma'am. Morning when we are joining the class, it is showing that the still video is not prepared. So I couldn't join that. So can we get that video link?
Yes, you can go to YouTube and you can see, type the date, and maybe after 24 hours you can listen to that. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. Thank
It
you.
will be in the YouTube. Yeah, Sirisha.
Yes, ma'am.
I think you are not muted. You are the one who are asking me? No.
I'm not, ma'am. You Zoom user, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. Sirisha, mute yourself. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah, Tawseef, please go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. One second. Okay, students were different psychological. Okay, so this is your unit. Actually, done with the first 4 units.
Professor, please.
Just now, first of all, let us talk
Your video.
Sir,
Yeah.
Sir, your voice was not clear, sir.
Okay, one second. Shall I turn off video? Better. Okay, so let us about, am I audible to you now? Am I audible to you now?
No, sir. Your video is stuck and your screen is yet to be shared with us.
Yeah, no. One clip.
There is a lag.
No.
There is a latency.
Am I audible?
Could you please try again?
Am I audible? Am I audible now?
Yes, Professor, you are audible.
Okay, fine. So today in today's class we're going to talk about different in language learning. Okay. So first of all, let us go through the objectives. Let us go through the objectives of this block of this unit. I mean, that is unit number 5. Unit number 5 is titled Psychological Factors in Language Learning. First of all, let's go through the objectives. There are a couple of objectives. Understand the various personal factors that influence language learning. So there are various, psychological or personal factors which are responsible for influencing, factors that influence language learning. So we're going to talk about those various factors. Second is the other objective is analyze individual factors that affect language learning. Okay, so the various factors we're going to talk about, there are some psychological factors actually. In fact, the unit is titled Psychological Factors in Learning, in Language Learning. That is motivation, aptitude and aptitude, then memory. All these things are related to psychologically, basically. These are psychological terms, we can say. So let's look at the introduction. Language learning is a universal human ability. All human beings learn at least one language, but the need to learn a second language arises for most people, especially in educational settings. So language learning is basically a universal human ability. We all know that human beings at least know one language. But when he goes to school, when he or she attended school, he comes across other languages. So the need to learn a language acts as a stimulus for us. So when we go to the school, the language actually it acts a kind of stimulus for us. The degree of success in learning a second language depends on the individual's aptitude for language learning in general and the attitude towards a particular language. So the degree of success, the degree of success in learning a language, a second language, depends on what individual's aptitude. Now, when you define aptitude is basically your special ability in something. Okay, so the two things are important here. So when we talk about learning a second language, it depends on the individual aptitude. So aptitude can be defined as your special ability. Okay, and the attitude also towards a particular language. So these aptitude and attitude are two basic things when we talk about language learning. So aptitude, I told you, is basically the special talent, the special ability or special capability, we can say. And attitude, on the other hand, is what? Your mental set. Okay, your overall behavior towards a language. And secondly and thirdly, memory also plays an important part or role in language learning. So there are various factors, we can say, when we talk about language learning. There are various factors, or these are all psychological factors which are responsible for what? Language learning. So one is aptitude, the other is attitude, and And the other thing is memory. Memory also plays an important role in language learning. So in this unit basically talks about psychological factors which are responsible within the individual, which actually influence language learning. Is that clear? So the first is motivation. Okay, so all we know that all we have, all human beings have that innate ability of learning. We have that innate ability of learning. Okay, learning things. So all human beings have the innate language faculty that predisposes them to learn at least a language. The language faculty also allows an individual to learn any number of language according to the need. So language, we have that faculty of mind or with the help of which we learn a language, or we learn a number of languages, many languages. No other living creature has this ability, although insects, birds, and animals have their own non-verbal modes of communication. So no other ability, no other creature on this earth, on this planet Earth, has the ability. Though animals, birds, and other living creatures, they also communicate in their own way, that is non-verbal modes. Okay, but we have this, mankind has been given this innate ability to learn a particular language, or to learn many languages. So given the language faculty, language will not develop if it's not heard by the individual. So first of all, how do we learn a language? First, you have to listen to a language. It develops only when you hear to the words, when you hear to the vocabulary, when you listen to the content. Okay, so first comes hearing or listening. Child learns his first language by listening to the parents and other family members using language. So the first skill, so when we talk about different language skills, first comes listening. Listening is the first skill which gets developed, because a child, he listens to his parents, he listens to the family members using his language faculty. So the first language is a language in the child's environment. So the first language is what his parents speak, what his other family members speak. Though every human being has the innate predisposition for language acquisition, the particular language that a person acquires is the language of the immediate environment. That is the family. So all in all, we can say that is the result of the family, is that whatever his or her this language, whatever the family of a child or family, the other members of the family speaks, he actually gets that language. He gets that is his innate ability. That is the language he gets from the immediate environment. That is his family. He develops that language. So it is actually the first language a child learns is from his own family. So motivation for learning the first language emerges from actual communication needs. Uh, say, for example, if we have to learn to ask for things, she needs food, milk, water. This inner urge to communicate, fulfill, wants finds expression through the language heard in the environment. For example, if somebody asks for he needs food, or he needs water, we have this, we find these expressions through a particular language. We thus finally interplay among the three preconditions: faculty, access, and motivation in the process of. So these three things, there are some conditions which are required in order to get hold, or in order to learn a particular language. That is faculty. Faculty refers to your language learning faculty. Secondly, we must to have access to learn a language. And thirdly, very important, is the motivation. You must be motivated, you must be mentally prepared to learn a particular language. So there are other factors that apply to learning a second language. For example, adequate exposure is absolutely essential, and this has to be maximized in the language classroom, especially in the language is no commonly used language at home or in society, as in the case of English. So to learn a second language, to learn a language, educate, exposure, educate, or we can say sufficient exposure is needed. So in addition, the learner should have a impelling urge to learn the language. This is what is called. So having an urge to learn a particular language is called motivation. So there are three things here. One is there are three conditions when you talk about learning a language. One is faculty. Faculty is refers to the language faculty, the language, learning faculty, the language learning ability, capacity, capability, ability. Second is access. You should have access to the to learn a language. You should get that proper environment. Okay. And third is motivation. Motivation in the sense that you should have that urge. You should have that desire. You should have that thirst, or to learn a particular language. So these are three preconditions, we can say, or three very important things when we talk about learning a language. So we may wish to learn a language for various reasons. We might like the sound of the language. We might like the people. We might like the people speaking the language and might want to get closer to them. We might have heard of the richness of the literature and culture of the language, and might want to read, understand them firsthand by reading the language. In all these cases, we wish to learn language for its own sake and not for a specific purpose. This kind of motivation is called, so when we wish intrinsic motivation. So one of the types of motivation it talks about when we wish to learn a language for various reasons. For example, we might like the sound of the language. We might like the people speaking a particular language, and so that we get closer to them. We learn that language to speak to the people and to get closer to them. And we talk about richness of language and culture of the language, and might want to read, understand them by reading the language. So these are different cases, different, we can say, different purposes of language. In all these cases, we wish to learn language for its own sake and not for any specific purpose. So this motivation, so all in all, motivation is very, very important for what? For learning a language. We might also have to learn a language because we need it to get a job, or because we have to visit or stay in the country or region where it is spoken. So sometimes we also learn a language because we need a job. We need to go for a job because we visit or we stay in the country or region where it is spoken. So this is for a different purpose. This is for a different specific purpose or different purpose. So this kind of motivation is instrumental motivation. So one is intrinsic motivation. The other is what? Instrumental motivation. Yeah. 1 second. Are you getting me? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Are you getting whatever I'm saying? Are you getting me? Do you follow
Yes, sir.
me?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
fine. 1 second. Okay, can you see the screen?
No, sir.
No?
No, sir, it's not visible.
Okay, 1 second. Can you see it now?
No, sir.
1 second, give me a second. Maybe once again, I have to go to 1 second. Okay, screen. Yes. Yes, can you see it now? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Sir,
Yes,
it
sir.
is
This is your screen, huh? Okay. Sometimes please mute yourselves. Okay. Sometimes even when there is enough exposure to a language, individuals may fail to acquire it or may learn it imperfectly. So sometimes what happens when there is uh, sometimes when there is even enough exposure to the language, sometimes individual we fail to acquire it or we fail to learn it effectively or imperfectly. So that is what happens in the case of learning English or learning Hindi in school if it's not our mother tongue. So sometimes we have exposure also, we have that particular environment also, but we are not in a position to learn a language. So because see, when we talk about second language, say take the case of Hindi, take the case of English. So in children learn school language because they are prescribed and at the early stages, children are not aware of the benefits that accrue from knowing other languages. So because as students or children learn languages because they don't know the benefit of it. They know, they are aware, they are conscious about their benefits. In the future, that is why these languages are learned. Hence, there are problems in learning them. Hence, there are problems in learning them. If the first language is adequate to achieve immediate communication, hence motivation to learn other languages is low. See, for example, if the first language, for example, Telugu speakers, if you feel that you are very proficient, and if you feel that you are proficient in achieving what communication is required in your mother tongue, if you feel that you are proficient in that, if you feel that it's enough for you, motivation to learning or other motivation to learn other languages will be low. Okay, so this is what we see happening in the learning of English in schools. So that is what is happening in, that's the one thing. If you think that your mother tongue is sufficient, if you think that you are very proficient and very fluent, and you are very adequate, you're very comfortable when it comes to when it comes to speaking your mother tongue, when it comes to speaking your original language. So that is the issues in regional medium schools. If a language is not spoken at home or in the society around, it becomes difficult to learn it. This difficulty and strain in following the language affects motivation. Okay, say for example, if you want to learn German, German is not spoken at homes. It will become so difficult to follow it or to learn this language because there is no motivation. It affects our motivation. Okay, so there is no, when there is no environment, there's we as speakers are not motivated to learn this particular language. For example, say French or German. Success results in increased motivation and failures reduces motivation. So success results in what? Increased motivation and failures reduce motivation. So other factors which are responsible that affect motivation to learn a language are the kind of textbooks used to learn it. So that is very important. What textbooks are prescribed for us to learn a particular language? That kind of is if for example, are your textbook are is you are your text your is your textbook kind of motivates you to learn a language or demotivates you? That also is very important. Textbooks should be such that they motivate us to learn a particular language. Okay, attitude of the teacher and how interesting the language class is. And attitude of the teacher, the mental set, the attitude, the way teacher behaves with us is also is very important when we talk about language learning. And how interesting the language class is. Whatever is relevant to the learner and is connected to real life will tend to be interesting. This is called authenticity. So whatever is relevant to the learner, and if a teacher is in a position to connect the concepts with the real life world, with a real world, ultimately the class will be interesting. And this concept is called as authenticity. So whatever is culturally familiar to the learner will also be motivated. See, for example, in a culture, if you, for example, uh, you know, in your culture, you might be familiar with something, for example, whatever the thing, it will intrinsically it will be motivated. Obviously, it will be motivating for you. It should also relate to the times that the learners live in. This is called contemporaneity. Okay, the language must also be readily usable outside the classroom. When students reach high school, their motivation to learn English increases because they are called upon to speak it at various public places. So when we reach high school, our motivation to learn English increases because we are supposed to speak it at various public places. At the lower classes, especially in the rural areas, there is no opportunity to use English, and hence children see no point in learning it. At the lower classes, what happens in especially in rural areas, there is no opportunity. We don't have opportunities to speak English, and hence we think that no, there is no point to learn it. There's no advantage in learning it, in learning a particular language. And that was something in detail you have talked about. Because we are talking about different psychological factors that are influence language learning, language learning behavior, or language learning. So attitude and aptitude, I have already defined it for you. Yeah, am I audible? Am I audible to you guys?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, one second. So the other factor which is responsible for language learning is attitude. So what is attitude? Attitude is something closely related to motivation, is a person's disposition to language and language learning. Mentioned earlier, if one language suffices a person's individual needs for communication, uh, he or she may not see the use for learning other language. It may be said that the person is not generally willing to make an effort to learn what is not immediately useful. So it has been said that if the person is not generally willing to make an effort to learn what is not immediately useful, he will not learn that language. If the person is not willing to learn a language, if he does not make an effort to learn a language, this is the person's attitude learning. In contrast, there may be individuals who are naturally positively inclined towards learning as much they possibly can. Some individuals are particularly good at learning language. These people are said to have an aptitude of learning language. Okay, so sometimes there are individuals who are positively inclined. They learn a language and they are very kind of inclined towards learning a language. Some individuals are particularly good at learning languages. They have to have an aptitude for learning languages. So may your friends, for example, they are very kind of inclined learning other language, for example, Tamil, Canada, and Canada, sorry, other languages. Okay, so we can say that they have that aptitude, they have that natural inclination towards learning other languages. That is something innate that predisposes them to learning languages. So that is very something which is innate in them. That is something which is inborn in them. So that is their aptitude. Okay, so language learning becomes easy if there is natural aptitude for it. So one is your attitude. Attitude is what is the willingness. Attitude refers to your willingness to learn a particular language, and on the other hand, aptitude is when you are positively inclined, we can say. A positive, aptitude is something which is inborn in you. Aptitude is something which is innate in you, something inborn quality. Okay, and that is yeah. So I think yeah. So generally, you have an aptitude for languages. Also have a positive attitude towards towards other languages. Okay. So, however, it's later the people who speak the language as mother tongue and their culture. During the pre-independence time, some Indians had a healthy attitude to the ruling class, and this was carried to the language they spoke. English, another uh, people admire the ruling class as a superior race and love their language. So, if you talk about some Indians, they have this attitude towards the attitude to the ruling class, and this was carried to the language they spoke. For example, say for example, the English, the language were, once upon a time, or there has been a discussion that it is the language of colonizers, the British. Then and now people have this attitude of speaking this language. We said that no, we can fight with them using the same language, and people also, there are writers who wrote in English to fight, uh, yeah, to fight with them. So that is a kind of, that is a kind of, that is how what makes it interesting. So another people admire the ruling class as a superior race and love their language. Some people, uh, the benefits of the language would bring to the country and had a neutral but positive attitude towards English. So some people said that no, uh, some people loved their language. Some people said that no, ruling class is a superior and they loved their language, and had a neutral but positive attitude. People like Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru were staunch nationalists, but they learned in the language. So there have been examples. We have seen such staunch nationalists in the form of Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru, where they have been freedom fighters. They fought the English people using the same English language. So, in the first surge of nationalism after independence, anti-British feeling prompted state-level antipathy to English and pride in the native language of the country. All government educational institutes in the states opted for the regional language of the medium. So, what happens afterwards, after the independence? All government educational institutions in the states, they opted for this regional language as a medium of instruction. Okay. Uh, a large number of private institutions also opted for the regional language. This later was caused a divide between the two kinds of schools. So there were people, there were some states thought that no, regional language should be the medium of instruction, and other institutions also, even the private institutions, they said that mother tongue or regional language should be the medium of instruction. So we spoke of intrinsic motivation earlier in the previous section. So this is achieved when the learner identifies with the culture of the target language and has a positive orientation towards it. So that intrinsic motivation, he defines it again. He says that when a learner identifies with the culture of the target language. For example, when we identify with the culture of English, and we try to kind of feel positive, when we are positively inclined towards English, is called as intrinsic motivation. For example, he gives us an example here. See, he says that migrants who settle down in another region usually try to merge with the local communities for survival. Okay, migrants, people who travel to other places to settle down, uh, they begin speaking their language as naturally as possible so that they do not stand out. This phenomena is called acculturation. So it has something to do with culture. So say for example, if migrants, if for example people of a particular region or a particular state or a particular country, settlers down in another region, another country, another state, and they try to merge with them. They try to merge with them, with the local community. They start speaking their language naturally. That is very, very natural, so that they do not stand out. They kind of identify. For example, you have this language called diaspora. These people, diasporic writers, they have settled down in other countries. Okay. Yeah. Can you hear? Can you hear me? Am I audible to you guys?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay, okay. Do you follow what I'm talking about? Do you follow what I'm talking about? So I was
Yes,
saying
sir. Yes,
that
sir.
there are people who go to other countries, they are called as migrants. For example, we go to other countries, we start speaking their language. For example, if I go to Denmark, if I go to, for example, a particular country, say for example, Ireland, I start speaking Irish because I do not want to stand out. That is very, very natural. That is very, very natural. And this phenomena is called acculturation. Okay, so I was, talking about these diasporic writers. Now there are writers who are called as diasporic writers. You might have done a paper also, maybe diasporic literature. So these diasporic writers, what they do, they go to, for example, Khalid Hussain belongs to Afghanistan. Now he settled in US. Okay, and he writes about his own country. He writes about his own tradition. He writes about his own countryman. He writes about his own culture. Okay, so that is what is they are very, very kind of closely attached. They are closely attached to their mother being, to their motherland, but they speak uh, the language of the country they are settled in. So that is called as acculturation. The closer the identification with the target language community, the better the language learning. So he talks about how, when if we are, for example, he says that if we want to learn a particular language, we must identify with the culture. We must identify with the culture. That's how we can learn a particular language. So the distance that the learner maintains with the culture of the target language community determines the level of proficiency attained in that language. So identification of the culture, identification with the target language, community becomes very, very important in language learning. So then he gives the example of educational setting. In the educational setting, it is sometimes the personality of the teacher that affects the attitude to the target language. So in an educational scenario, it is also sometimes the personality of the teacher that affects the attitude to the target language. And when the teacher is such, it is sometimes it's the personality of the teacher that affects the attitude to the target language. If the teacher is interesting and motivating enough, learners begin to like that language and are successful in learning it. If a language teacher is interesting and motivating, ultimately learners will begin to like the language and they very successfully learn it. Okay. The family's attitude to the language also plays a role. If the parents or older siblings encourage the learner to put in more effort into learning a particular language, the learner's attitude is positive. So language also, if you're, for example, your family is, has that, if your family speak a German, for example, or French, you also start speaking because, you kind of get that motivation. You are, intrinsically motivated from your parents or from your siblings. So that was something, so that attitude and aptitude in language learning. So we are talking about different psychological factors here. Now the other is psychological factor is memory. These are all terms, which has to do with what? The behavior of a learner. Memory is integral to learning. So memory is what an important component of learning. Memory. It's equally important for language learning. Language learning involves the naming of objects, actions, their descriptions, and their interrelations. So language learning involves what? It involves the naming of objects, actions, or descriptions, and their interrelations or their relations, interrelation concepts. The traditional description of this was parts of speech. When we learn a language, we associate each of the above with the words used for them in that language. Okay, so there is this, you might have done it in your literary theory paper when we start. We talk about structuralism, right? It is yeah. We say that we talk about sign, signified, and signifier. So these are the concepts are the same here. The association of words with that, with what they signify. So we associate words with what they, for example, we have signifier, signified. See, for example, we have a sign, something called a sign. What did it signify? Signified. Okay, the other is signifier. It refers to the object. For example, chair. So what does it signify? Is it signified? The signified maybe the chair. Sign involves the operation of the memory. The next step in language learning is the understanding of the rules of language, applying them when it's used. So next step in language learning is what? Understanding the rules of the language and applying these rules when a particular language is used. In some approach to language learning, the rules are given. Learners then made to memorize them and practice them. See, for example, some sutras are memorized and applied in traditional approach, in Sanskrit teaching. This follows the deductive method of learning, the inductive method of learning by discovery. So, there are rules which govern them actually. That's what he is talking about. The generalization of the working mechanism of the language is an innate ability of the human mind. Noam Chomsky, who is regarded as the famous linguist, posited the view that universal grammar, which is understand, I'm not getting there. I mean, cannot see that. Which is
Understood, sir.
understandable.
Understood.
Understood. Okay, understood. Okay. Do you have the textbook with you? Okay, all
Sir,
right.
yes,
Which
yes.
is understood intuitively by the human mind. So Noam Chomsky talks about universal grammar. He was a famous linguist. Noam Chomsky is a famous linguist. He talks about the universal grammar, which is understood intuitively. What is intuitively? Intuitively, intuition. For example, something which you get on your own, which is learned on your own. For example, intuition. Intuition, we say that intuition is not source of knowledge, not the source of knowledge. For example, you have observation, you are experimenting, learn from observation, you learn from experimentation. 1 second, my connection is unstable. Yeah, am I audible to? Yeah,
Sir.
hello.
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Yeah,
But some we have missed, sir.
okay.
Few seconds, what you said we couldn't understand. Couldn't listen that.
So I was talking about So we are talking about memory. Memory is regarded as something which is very, very important to learning. And next we talk about interactive. So is very, very important when we talk about language learning, interactive method. And he talks about the very important thing. Noam Chomsky as a famous linguist. He talks about grammar. Intuitively. So intuition, it's the derivative of intuition. Actually, intuition is root word.
Sorry to
Intuition
interrupt you,
refers
teacher.
to something.
Sorry to
Okay.
interrupt you, sir.
Yes, please.
Yeah, in the middle,
Yeah.
yeah, it's disturbing. Can you please check? Or
Okay,
can you
okay,
please
fine.
pardon it?
Okay, so memory. So we talked about attitude earlier, right? So now we are talking about psychological factors, memory as a psychological factor that influence language learning. Are you getting me? So talking about Noam Chomsky, who has given us something called universal grammar, where he says that which is understood intuitively by the human mind. Is there are certain properties common to all languages, certain rules, structure of individual language. We basically say that general rules, there are some certain properties or general rules which are called the language. Not my language, This ability again depends on association and what is that word there? Association and memory. Yeah. Hello.
Yes, sir.
What is the word there? Can anybody tell me what is knowing one language? Second paragraph, third line. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are certain line you say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes. What is the
Acquired.
word?
Acquired,
Can you
sir.
read? Okay, acquired. Knowing one language helps, which is understood from all languages acquired in certain rules that govern the structure in the language. Basically says that there are some rules when you know which are applied to all languages. For example, if you learn a particular language, it helps you to learn other language. So instinctively compares the new language with the new language. Discover the difference and similarities between the two. We have ability, that intrinsic ability. We start naturally compare the similarities and the differences between the languages. Okay, that is what Noam Chomsky says. So when we learn a new language which is similar to we easily acquire the words that is similar in meaning in two languages. For example, he says that when we learn a new language, for example, if you start learning Kannada, I think there are many words, common words between Kannada, and since it's a common South Indian language, Dravidian language, right? So if you hear and if you speak, if you want to learn Kannada, you will easily learn because there are similarities in terms of maybe vocabulary and okay, you have common words. Say, for example, Telugu and this Kannada has many common words. That's what he says. If you learn a new language which is something of our own, we can easily acquire the words that is similar in meaning in the two languages. Say, for example, many Indian languages are derived from Sanskrit, right? He gives us as a he says that many languages, all the Indian languages are derived from what? Sanskrit. Sanskrit is regarded as the root. Okay, and if the same word is used for the same item in two languages, it is easily acquired, right? For example, the and little effort that language. Oh my God. Yeah. Can you hear me? Hello. GB, where are
Yes,
you today? Are you DV? Where is DV? Yes. I think DV has left the. All right. So I was basically. Do you follow? Basically, we are talking about similarities and dissimilarities. Thomas says, according to his rule, he has given a theory of universal grammar. He says that when there are similarities, he says that there are certain properties associated to a language, associated to a particular language, and he says that to learn a particular language, he says that there are certain properties common to all the languages. There are certain rules or those specific or those particular rules that govern the structure of languages. So in the similar way, I said that when we learn new language, it becomes very easy for us to acquire the words to learn a language. For example, I told you that many Indian languages are derived from what? Which language? Sanskrit. Sanskrit is regarded as the root language. Okay. And for example, if you use the word, there's a word called Akash. Now, Akash is basically a Hindi word, and at the same time, it is used in many languages. Right. For example, Namaste. Now, Akash may become Akasham. in Telugu, right? Right.
Sir.
I'm not sure about it. Akasham, what is the Telugu word for sky in Telugu? What is the Telugu word for sky? Akasham, right? So when you hear Akam, you can make out may refer to sky because Akash is used in most languages. Word is required to learn such. So for that, mood, ocean, etc. So there are now what is that etc. What is the word there? That what there? Can you read it for me? Word there. What is it?
That is, sir. That
Can you
is.
read it for me, somebody.
That is.
That is there are similarities between okay. So that is there are similarities between closely related languages that belong to the same language. Is a languages. Say for example, English, we talk about that it is basically an Indo or European group, and basically, for example, Indian languages, they belong to the same family. They belong to the same family. Say for example, Indian languages families, they use, we can say, of the same language, that Sanskrit, Telugu, all the Indian languages. So he says that there are similarities, we can see there are differences, or similarities and differences between the languages that belong to the same group, the same family. Similarly, structural patterns of two languages are contrasted. The structures like Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, and the South Indian languages are similar. The structure of Marathi, Gujarati are similar. So he talks about structure of the language group called a Dravidian group, that is Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, and Malayalam. The South Indian languages, they are similar, interconnected. Right? Kannada, for example, all these groups are interconnected with each other in terms of structure and in terms of other things. Okay, and the structures of Marathi, Gujarati are similar. Pattern recognition is achieved through memory. And what is not possible in language is also supported by memory. So memory here also plays an important role. What is possible? Pattern recognition is achieved through memory. Pattern recognition and what is not to learn in a language is memory. So language is learned not as isolated words but chunks of phrases. So we can say in conclusion, learn not as isolated, not as isolated entities, we can say, but as chunks of phrases. People does not have to gather the have to. What is the word there? What is it that? Speaker does not have to. What is the word there? Yes. Hello? Hello?
Sir.
Yeah. What is the word there?
Put.
Hello? Yeah. Huh?
Sir, put. To put.
Put.
How to put.
Okay, does not have to put together the individual words each time, but has access to the prefabricated units. These words, yeah, what is the word? These
When.
words,
When.
these
When.
when retrieved help in the rapid acquisition of language. Children learning their first language are what is the word?
Able.
Able to make quick progress in language acquisition for the ability of memorizing chunks. So basically, all in all, he says that language cannot be learned as individual words. Language, a particular language, cannot be learned as isolated chunks or phrases. Language is learned as a whole. Okay, so language is learned as a whole, and that is how memory is very, very important. That is how memory plays a role. Learning the first language to make quick progress in language acquisition because of this ability of memorizing chunks. So while language learning is essentially a cognitive process. When we talk about language learning, it is uh, essentially it's basic process. What is cognitive process? Involving rule discovery. It is a what is the word? It is
Also.
also assisted by pattern practice through repetition. So in conclusion, we can say that language learning is essentially a cognitive process. The cognitive process is a mental process, something which has to do with our cognition, cognitive activities, for example, memorizing. We talk about mental processing, memory. All these are regarded as cognitive processes. So language learning, in the similar way, in the similar fashion, is also a cognitive process through discovery. It is assisted by pattern practice through repetition. So language is all about repetition. So it is assisted by pattern practice through repetition. Memory thus has an important role to play in language. So in this way, memory has the role to play, an important role to play. So all let us sum up the unit. So all in all, we can say that in this unit we talked about different psychological factors which are responsible for what language learning, or that affect language learning. We began with motivation. We talked about motivation. We then talked about aptitude. We talked about attitude. We talked about memory. All these have an impact on learning and explain different individual difference in the process. These also affect instruction in the class. So we talked about all these factors, all these factors: aptitude, attitude, and memory. All these impact on learning and explain individual in the process. All these have an impact on learning, individual differences in the process. These also affect classroom. Language teaching will have to take into account effective factors also. So that marks the end of the unit number 5, right? So now there are some sample questions, examination questions. Important. The first one is, motivation is important for all learning. In what ways is it more important for language learning? Discuss with reference to learning English as a subject school. So how is motivation important for learning? In what ways it is important for language learning? And you have to discuss, you have to take an example of English as a school subject in our country. So that is question number 1, sample question number 1. The other question is, what are the factors that are responsible for the lowering of motivational levels for learning English in educational settings in India? That's what we were talking about some time ago.
Professor, if we have to attempt this question in the exam, how would we go about it? What would we talk about? What would sort side headings would we put? Could you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, sample questions. DB, you were not in the class, it seems. You were somewhere else, right?
No, sir. I want you to tell me how we structure our answers to go ahead and write about
it. See, motivation. See, for example, about this question called motivation is important for learning. You have to define motivation, and you have to say how motivation is important for language learning. So that is the first part of the question.
Okay.
You have to talk about the ways it is more important for language learning. So what are the ways of important, for language learning? In what ways you learn a language? So we have already discussed them, right? Some time ago. Discuss with reference to language learning. Then you have to take up this other part. That is so you have to actually, this should be in the context. The answer should be contextual. Whatever the question demands, you should always write in that direction.
Understood.
See, for example, the other question is, what are the factors that are responsible for the lowering? You have to talk about the factors that are for the lowering, and your answer should be always to the point. That's how it can fetch you good marks. Isn't it? What are the factors that are responsible for the lowering of motivation level? So you have to talk about those motivation levels for learning English in educational in the context of India.
Got it.
Some of the simple questions.
Very helpful.
Yeah.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. So, anybody has a question? Anything? Anybody? You want to ask? You want to add up whatever I say, or you want to say, for example, initiate the discussion? We still have 5 minutes to go. Yeah. Very less students today. yesterday, at least they were 21, 23.
Today is a work day, Professor, so many people are working.
Okay, okay, yeah, Monday. Okay, all right. Let's see. Anybody have a question? DV, you want to say anything? Or do you have something to say, or you want to add up whatever we have discussed so far?
Well, no, I was patiently listening to you. Today there have been some issues regarding your voice, so focusing on what you're saying
Really?
actually.
Okay.
Yes, yes. So
Okay.
that was one of the factors, but still I was
Yes,
able
yes.
to hear
Earlier I
you.
was not able to log in. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So no, after that part, when the lecture started, so when you were explaining the initial part of certain things,
Yes,
your voice was
yes,
getting
yes.
garbled. So, but still, I was able to comprehend what you were talking about. And
Oh.
today it was more to the material. So that's a very nice thing.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, that is because I had to. It is because of you. You had sent me the material, so I was in a position to do it. Otherwise, actually, I had no text. I had to collect I have collect the information from different books, different sources.
Well,
So I had now they are sending me the textbook. I think it will come.
right.
It will reach here within maybe 2-3 days.
Right. So at least
then,
for a span
yeah,
of okay. So one thing we can do now is how much time do we have? We have about 3 minutes, Professor. So we can call it
yeah,
square. Or if you want to add anything, or anyone else want to say anything? And, I'm sorry to have taken your time.
Yes. Anybody has a question or you want to say something? You're most welcome. Please do that. Okay, then all right. I will end up the meeting. I am leaving the meeting. Okay. See you in the next class. Okay.
Good
Take
day.
care.
Good day, Professor.